Ryan Ray and Ben Samuels present Bring in the Closers, a podcast on making deals and doing business.
Welcome to episode 5 of Bring in the Closers. Ryan Ray alongside the one, the only, Ben Samuels. Ben, how's it going today, sir?
It's going fantastic. I'm just stoked to be on the podcast with somebody that's got a top 20 all-time podcast. Pretty amazing, I'll tell you. I'm just lucky to be in the room. I'm feeling grateful today, Ryan. I'm feeling grateful. That's all I gotta say.
Oh boy, shots are being fired. What was transpiring off air has gone to on air, which leads me to a little behind the scenes, Ben. I want to do a little behind the scenes today before we have our guest Robert Martinez. And for the listeners out there, you might be looking at the artwork, and the artwork, we haven't really explained that. Let's kind of explain it. Bring in the Closers is a baseball reference. And the artwork has two people, one Samuels, one's Ray, and they have numbers, 52 and 9. And I thought we should tell the people where we get the numbers from. And the reality is that we put our close rates on there. So 52% to 9%. And so it was, it's in case folks were wondering where that came up with, that's where it was. And 9 also, I think, represents the amount of deals you've closed all time. It just happens to be your percentage as well. Works out well for you. Anyways, so we had
we talked about this like before making the numbers, and I thought that we had come out of 100. Instead of doing 90, I just cut the 0 and put 9, and you put 52 for a 52%. Sorry, I guess we got our wires crossed. That's on me.
I thought we did too, because I thought yours was 0.09% close rate, but whatever. We'll call it 9.
All right. By the way, for the listeners, if you're not on LinkedIn and you're not connected with Ryan and I'd advise you get on there and connect, because I'm sure there's going to be pieces of this podcast that I'll be misquoted on, but they'll be posted on next week's feed of Ryan's. So make sure that you key in on that. You don't want to miss it.
We do have a review coming in, our first review, so we're very thankful for that. Kyle Peters, who we both are connected with on LinkedIn, and he says it in the review, 5-star review, following both Ryan and Ben on LinkedIn. I've been looking forward to this podcast since it was announced. Great insight here, and looking forward to more episodes. Thank you, Kyle. And Kyle is one of Ben's 6 LinkedIn connections, so double thanks, Kyle, for being there for Ben when he needs you most.
Actually, hot update since last week. Since I was at 6, I'm now at 8. So he's one of 8 now. I'm moving in the right direction.
You almost have, 9 will represent your LinkedIn connections next week.
This podcast is like taking my reach from here to like just new levels. I am telling you.
Well, it's good. We do what we can around here. As we said, we have on a guest. Ben, this week, real quick, let's talk about where we're going to be at. We're going to be at Midland. The Produced Water Society will have a conference. I know we'll be in and out of that. We have meetings. Now, last week, we talked about Nate not releasing the episode until the presidential 2020 election. He was able to beat that deadline, and he got it out. Hopefully, he'll get this out before we're out of Midland this week. But if that is the case, and Nate, for some reason, decided to start doing his job, thank you, Nate, then you hear this podcast, reach out to us, Ben, and we have some spots available for meetings, I believe.
We do. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess all it takes is to call Nate out, and he'll get stuff done. I mean, all you got to do is call him out on the podcast. And, he doesn't edit it properly because he leaves the stuff in. But, what are you going to do? You got to take the good with the bad, I guess. But we're moving in the right direction.
You can't have it all. You can't have it all. But Nate did get that done. Also, we do have a bat line, if you will. If you want to leave a voicemail, a text for a question for Ben or myself, 682-422-4105. That's a lot to remember. That will be in the show notes, or you can find it at bringintheclosers.com. You can find it there as well. Okay. Ben, you said you had a surprise for me, so let's hear it. What's the surprise?
It's actually kind of a letdown since we talked on air for a few minutes and you didn't say anything about it. But if you notice, it's like Samson with his hair. The Bible story, like the Samson with the long hair, and he gets the hair cut and he loses his powers. Mm-hmm. I feel like so on days when I shave my beard, because I don't know if you can tell on air, but I shaved it down pretty good. On days that I do that, I do feel weaker, so I don't feel like I'm on my A game today. But the good news is that this thing grows back pretty quick, and so by the time you see me tomorrow, it might be back. It might take a few more days, but that was it. It was kind of a just a little something. Unfortunately, the people that are listening can't see it, but I can't tell you how many times. I'll just say, can't tell you how many times, how frequently at conferences or around Midland or around Denver or what have you, somebody will just randomly stop me that haven't met before, and they notice me and recognize the beard. And so now that I don't have it, I'm hoping that people know who I am and want to still talk to me.
I'm just hoping people see you on your A game. That would be nice for once to see that. So that's good to know.
Wow.
That's good to know.
Shots fired. Okay. Hey, I just do the best I can, Ryan. We can't all be on the Ryan Ray level, okay? I'm just trying to do the best I can.
No, that's good that you shaved your beard and you will allow me some airtime this week. It's good to know. It's interesting. Ben, let me see here. I had a question for you, and I thought about this some last week. And before we get Robert on, just kind of get your thoughts on this because we don't really have a planned episode. We didn't do a lot of show prep this week, as you might can tell.
I wonder who to blame.
No idea, but we'll let the listeners figure that out. At what point you're going to meet with someone, you're going to close a deal, or pitch a deal, whatever. How do you transition from the formal email to either text or informal email? What is it? Is it age? Is it gut feeling? What is it that lets you go, you know what? I think at this point now I can now text this person, including on and off hours. Email, a formal email, I think is acceptable at all hours because everyone kind of understands that. But informal email or text, that's kind of fringe territory. At what point do you feel like you can then enter that world with someone before you've gotten a deal done with them?
I generally let the other person dictate the lines of communication and the frequency and medium, et cetera. And so I probably, I'd love to hear some feedback from you as well on this, because that's something that I think it kind of comes down to each individual person's communication style, but then also kind of how they address these things. But, I'm generally not going to be the first one to send a text. I generally, and as you've probably seen, I mean, most of my emails are pretty formal, or I like to, be pretty professional. I really don't wade into the unprofessional or just kind of, couple word email waters too often, unless I have that relationship, because I think it's important to, to be a professional and have respect for people's times and respect for people's boundaries. That being said, if a client calls me on, weekday at 9:30 p.m., and I'm available, I'm going to pick up the phone and we're going to talk. And then, if I have something that I need to run by them, later on down the road in the deal, I probably have the same fairway to call them, off hours as well, because it's obvious that, that's okay. General strict deadline or strict guidelines. I'm never going to call somebody and pick up the phone unless I know for some reason that they're available and want to talk to me, etc. I'm not ever going to talk to somebody or call someone prior to 9 a.m. Central. And then similarly, I generally am not going to reach out to anybody unless there's a specific reason, or unless I have a some reason to believe that it's okay after like 7:30 p.m. And so I kind of stay within those ranges, because outside that's family time, and then also similarly, I generally am not going to reach out to somebody on the weekends unless they initiate that contact.
Yeah, I think it depends on for me the level, and I'm using the word desperation here. I don't know if that's the right word, but the level of desperation to get into contact. So, if I'm talking to someone and it's very formal email, or it's through call during work hours, and we have either some kind of milestone coming up, or it's just at the point where I'm not sure if they're interested or not. At that point, I will kind of escalate it to maybe a text. I won't go after hours phone calls or stuff like that if I'm kind of concerned that this may be going wayward, if you will. But for me, that's kind of the first indicator. Is if things are going good, naturally, it seems like in today's environment, it will eventually lead to a text, because, and I'll set this up sometimes, formal email, you might have a lunch or dinner, text message, hey, I'm here at the restaurant. Well, now I've opened that texting door through a natural means that's not intrusive. It's still professional, just letting them know, but that sometimes opens the door. On the flip side, if it's not going well, and I'm trying to make sure that things are, things are progressing, I have to presume on some level that this person is getting hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. They're busy, and so I need to use your phrase, cut through the noise. And so I might send a text that says, hey, Ben, been trying to reach you, everything okay, or whatever it might say. That's kind of the two general paths that I take to transition from something formal to a little bit more informal. And the final thing I'll say is, if it's Hail Mary desperation time, and I've used this before and it's actually worked. I called a client one time. They were going to give us some work. Didn't answer. Called. They didn't answer. I was riding the truck with someone. Said, give me your phone. Got his phone. Called the person. I'm talking 30 seconds. Different number. Person answered. Hey, how's it going? And you could tell when they answered, they realized I'd got him. Like, oh, wow, he got me. But what happened was, we went to work for him a week later. The person was just so busy that he knew that when he got me on the phone, it was going to take 5 minutes to kind of work through the 3 or 4 things. But once I got him, it was fun. And at that point for us, though, it was a deal where we weren't even sure that this was going to happen. We had to get this phone call done. And if it didn't get done, it probably was going to fall apart. So for me, it was at the point where if we don't talk to him, if he's not answering, he's not responding, if I can't get him now, we're probably never going to do it. But that was kind of Hail Mary last case scenarios. And I've tried that other times. It hadn't worked. It has worked as well.
I think a great point that you made is texting can be used, and to a certain degree, phone calls, I guess, as well. But texting can be used to kind of shake it up a little bit, in the sense that if you're emailing back and forth and there's something pressing that needs to be addressed, or they went radio silent, or something actionable happened that that's outside the scope. Like you said, that I'm a good example. I'm sure you're the same way. I mean, things get lost in email sometimes, and there are times where somebody will email me or call me, weeks after we discuss something, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm just following up on X, Y, or Z." And in the back of my head, to be honest with you, my first thought is, why did it take you a month to reach back out to me? Because there are times where I just need someone to bump something back up to the top of my inbox, and I don't take that the wrong way. And I think that if you do it with respect and you're not blowing somebody up, every 6 hours or every single day. But I mean, having that fairway, again, I love using that phrase, but having that ability to approach someone and just kind of be like, listen, we were talking about this, where are you on this? There's a lot of times, just like that, like your example about the phone call. I mean, there's times where I won't answer a phone call because I know if I pick it up, it's going to take more time than I have at that moment. And then the secondary kind of unfortunate part of that is that there are times where I forget to call that person back. And so unless they take the initiative to pick up the phone again and call me or email me or text me, it might fall off my plate. And so that's just a function of business. I mean, I don't think that that's a commentary on workflow for you and I don't think that that's a commentary on taking on too much. I think that there's just sometimes, I'll be sitting in a meeting at a random time during the day, and I just simply can't pick up the phone at that time because it's not conducive to what I'm doing. But that doesn't mean that contact isn't super important, right? And so and I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but to bring it back, yeah, I mean, I think that coming back to something that I said, I believe it was episode 1 or 2. One of the other things that I'm thinking about in that context is always, like I mentioned, I'm tuned into that radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me. And so I need to understand, why am I reaching out to the person? What am I asking of them? And what's actionable? Like, what are the different ways that this can go? And if I can present the communication, whether by text or email or what have you, with that prism in mind, what I try to do a lot of times to kind of navigate what we're talking about is I will intentionally think through the different roadblocks and different avenues that someone, like the different things that someone else may be thinking. And in my email, I'll say, okay, so here's what we're looking at. If you think X, here's what we can do. If you think Y, here's what you can do. If you think Z, here's what you can do. Respond back to me how you want to take next steps, and we'll move forward. Because then that just allows them to like pick one of the options and then puts the ball back in my court, which I'm happy with. I'm comfortable with that, right? And so I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I think that's great. And the final thing I'll say is one of the things I've learned, email is really hard to track because you get, all these subscriptions you're subscribed to. It's hard to do it with email, but with text, one of the things I do regularly is I'm looking for a guest or if I'm looking for someone to connect with on various things, I'll say, hey, I'll scroll through my text messages to look back. Who have I not called? Who have I not contacted? Who have I not done? Who have I not reached out to? And in that, I find the occasional text that I overlooked. So by me trying to be proactive to dig up old leads or whatnot, I will find an old text that I happen to look up, and I always leave on read receipts because it puts the pressure on my text message. At least it puts the pressure on me to make sure that I do respond to them because the read receipt, they saw that I read it.
So I know that we're pressing up against the time that we're going to have Robert coming on, but no, I think that's actually something that I want to kind of put an earmark in, and let's come back to the reader seats thing, because I you posted something a couple weeks back on LinkedIn, and I think I ended up commenting on it, but I want to talk to you a little bit more about that, because I think that's an interesting take as well.
I've known for maybe about a year now, and I consider him a friend. I hope you consider me a friend. Robert Martinez, who's the president and CEO at Titan Rock Exploration and Production. Robert, how's it going today, sir?
It is going great. It's a Monday morning. I don't know when this is going to be put out, but it's Monday morning, and gas prices are low, oil prices are low, and we're trying to make the best of
it. Yeah, the prices are definitely not where folks want them at. Let's just kind of take it here, 30,000 foot view, before we kind of get into some A&D discussion. Obviously, I said Titan Rock Exploration and Production, but who is that? What do you guys do? And obviously, no trade secrets or nothing, but just kind of 30,000 foot view for the folks who aren't familiar with you guys.
So Titan Rock E&P was started in 2017, and we're primarily a conventional operator with focus in the lower 48. What we've discovered is that we've had some success picking up some assets with an underwriting it for a conventional vertical type play and unconventional locations. The team we have here has got a background in horizontal drilling as well as grindy, blocking and tackling conventional assets. And so we have a pretty good skill set, and we're out there chasing the market, trying to acquire and grow. We've picked up a couple assets in East Texas, North Louisiana. So that's kind of our foothold right now, but we're looking for liquids, and I think right now in this price environment, it's a good time to buy. Obviously, some people may wince when I say that, because good deals are to be had in low prices and high prices. If you got a great operational team or some guys who know what they're doing, then you can cut a good deal in high prices as well.
Yeah, and that's we were talking about that some last week when I was in your office. Is that the market right now? I think you said I can't remember who it was. You had just met with someone. They said the market, the A&D market right now, the minerals market is you had been like this maybe 1980. I can't remember how you describe it. You've been in this business, and quick side note is me and Robert met last year, but we actually worked on a project like back in 2012 or something together. Didn't even know each other, so we've kind of come across each other in various circles over the time. But you've been in this business for quite some time. What is the state of the market now from your perspective, and what are you hearing on the street?
So from a general market perspective, execution, operation, we're in uncharted territory. You see the oil shale and gas shale booms taking off. We're in kind of uncertain times. From an A&D perspective, it's the same thing. There's a lot of folks not wanting to transact, not wanting to move. The market's a little volatile. The prices move up and down quite a bit. So it's very hard to pin down a value and make a transaction happen. So we're actually seeing pretty healthy deal flow. However, the closings are down significantly over the last 2-3 years. It's getting harder to do. You're seeing some of these major companies get these deals done, like Covey Park, Comstock, Osaka, Sabine, some of the big guys, because it's accretive to where they're at. It's scale. They're in it for the long haul. So, what we're seeing is a lot of quality of the assets on the market that are pretty poor. Some of them that are laden with inactive wells or grim marketing or midstream contracts. So it's a very interesting time. Some of the investors are pretty skittish right now. We met with a company last week who's in the long game that raises a big fund and goes out there and execute. Their cost of capital is important, and they're having a tough time even raising money. The environment right now, as far as politically and just from a general sentiment of the investment community, oil and gas is just not sexy right now. But however, almost all these endowments and all these funds have a toe in it at some point or another, and they'd like to get some more of it. They're just a little skittish right now. So that's kind of the long and short of it from an acquisition side of it.
I always find it really interesting, Robert, when looking at these different mineral buying and E&P firms, and you just alluded to it a little bit. A lot of these firms, they have, their model is 2 to 3 years and then exit. Some are 5 years and exit. Some of these are 8 to 10 years and exit. And then, when you couple that private equity money and those, that model with, returns on the street and you're talking about like Wall Street return on investment and those kind of terms, there seems to be, to me, a major divide in the economics of how these things are looked at and how these things are valued, whether you are, an in-house and an investor or like you mentioned, like a Covey Park, and you're, a shareholder at one of these majors, or you're, an equity partner in that side. Do you kind of see that same divide because I'm seeing a lot of times, or right now I'm seeing on the street, there's you mentioned there's significantly less deal flow, and I would definitely agree. And I think that a lot of that has to do with hesitation with firms that are trying to get into the market, but the price just isn't right, and the market isn't conducive to making an entry unless, like you mentioned, you're a major. But on the other side, a lot of these firms, it's really just a cash flow model. You need to accrue as much cash flow as possible to make the investors happy. And that doesn't allow you to really plan for the 3, 5, 10-year horizon. What do you think about that?
Well, what's happened essentially is that with the resurgence of the private equity-backed teams, most everyone's looking for a 3 and out, 3-year and flip. And what they like to do is get scooch up above or right next to a major company like Chevron or Exxon, and lease around it, build a position, start with postage stamps and start scaling from there. And then they look for a 3-year flip. Well, these major companies got all they need. They've got their fill, they've got an inventory, sometimes dozens of years of inventory. So they're just not in the buy mode when you have that much rock that you're never going to get to. So it's really caused a pretty major issue with private equity backed companies, because now you've built a team and built an infrastructure and a group that is about leasing, drilling a couple wells and flipping, to now we actually have to make this work. Now we actually have to be cash flow positive. Now we actually have to build a company that's going to return capital to the investors. And that's something that a lot of the investors have woken up to in the last 2 years. When we set up our company, we set it up for a cash flow positive. We're here for a long time. Our equity sponsor is really great about that. And, we don't have a 3 and out flip. We can flip in 6 months. We can flip in 16 years. And we built a team for the long haul. Now, our skill set's such that we can turn around and go horizontal if we want to. But a lot of these private equity-backed companies that you read about that are NCAP or NGP-backed aren't set up that way. And the skill set of the technical folks that some of those 3 and out type companies are built upon can't get grindy and block and tackle and go out there and execute a plan for the long haul. And so now you're finding some major issues within the teams and the portfolio companies to figure out, okay, how do we pivot and how do we become a real cash flow positive company? And this is where, the winners are going to win and the losers are going to lose.
So I'm curious, Robert, just quickly, I don't want to take us too much off on a tangent, but something that I've been ruminating on for quite some time, and it doesn't seem to be really being employed out in the field in the Permian. It seems to me that it would make a lot of sense for some of these private equity-backed mineral buyers that have large, mostly undeveloped positions to JV with an operator and bring that operation in-house under the private equity, mineral, whatever you want to call it, umbrella, and be a fully stacked. So you buy the minerals or you lease the minerals, and then you bring in the operator, so you have control over your horizons, and you have control over your cash flow, et cetera, and you can poke as many holes in the ground as you want to, as opposed to buying up acreage around one of these majors. And like you said, if you're buying up around like a Chevron or Exxon, those guys have dozens of years of inventory to drill through, and so who knows when they're actually going to get to that position. Do you see that, or what would you say to that?
So you said an interesting word, and you're talking about minerals. Minerals and non-operated assets are something that can be a thorn in an operated company's side, and that's something that I'm seeing a lot of several independent horizontal drillers take note of, and they're trying to shed the non-operated assets and the mineral assets. And the reason for that is because you still have to deploy capital dollars into that, but wouldn't you want to deploy capital dollars in projects that you control and operate? And so most of the private equity companies aren't going to set up a top to bottom full value chain company from operations to minerals to royalties, et cetera. They're going to focus on what they do best. Most of the time when you're meeting with these capital equity or private equity sponsors, they want to back a team that knows what they're doing and they're good at this one thing. So they're just not set up to be good at royalties, set up at minerals, set up at operations, set up on shale, set up on conventional. So I think I know where your mind's at, but that's going to be something that's going to be left to more patient capital and more flexible capital. And that's not something some of these companies are willing to do.
Let me ask you this, Robert, and I've talked about this before. And I don't think if I've asked you, I don't remember your answer, so I'm asking you here. one of the things I've theorized, especially for like the Permian, is over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to see more of the Exxons, the Chevrons, because they're in a better position to not only hold the acreage, to pipe it, and to refine it. Do you think we will see I know you said these companies aren't set up for that, but do you think that maybe Wall Street will come in and put a little pressure, say, you know what, guys, you need to diversify, or you need to have better partnerships to pipe the product, not just get it out the ground, because if you could have that, you can have a different business model that you can work with other producers as well.
I think that's what the majors were founded upon, right? The reason the majors became majors is because through acquisitions and divestitures, they picked up assets, midstream assets, downstream assets. And I think that's how, if you look at the history and you read the prize and see how other companies were formed, that's essentially how things came to be and how companies became fully integrated. And they're going to continue to do that. But if you really look at companies like Chevron, Exxon, so on and so forth, Shell, BP, they're international companies. And so all their projects across the globe are competing for capital dollars. And I'll be honest with you, several of those other projects overseas are much more lucrative and much higher return than what we're doing here with shale oil. One of our investors we had a conversation last year when people were just putting holes in the ground and going horizontal. And he said, Robert, how are these people making money? And, I ran a couple of models and a couple of traps, and it's like, I'm not understanding how they're making it either. I think it's just scale, right? And again, some of it is, okay, let's get up next to Exxon and it's flipped, but that's not here anymore. I don't think that's going to happen.
You tell me. Okay. So let's sit back here. We talked about the uniqueness of the market and things like that. One of the things I'm curious about is, I'm sure because you work for an E&P company, a lot of people want to get in your door and they want to talk to you and to your staff. Let's walk through, how do you guys view the cold calls, the people dropping off packets? What advice for folks like Ben and myself would you say, hey, if you're wanting to be in this market, you want to be a closer, a deal maker, a mover, shaker, whatever, open behind the doors and say, these are the do's, these are the don'ts, at least for where you've been. And we didn't even cover your impressive backstory. So you've worked at some pretty impressive companies as well. So just kind of, pull the curtain back for a second, if you will.
Well, like the other day you came by with Chick-fil-A, that was well received. That seemed to open the door just fine, didn't it?
That worked, yes. Chick-fil-A works.
Well, you're right. We do get a lot of contact, a lot of emails, a lot of cold calls. But you know what? Quite frankly, cold calls, you got to do that sometimes. That's when I was out raising equity. That's what I had to do. They didn't know me from Adam, and I had to get in the door and explain them, essentially sell yourself. So I sympathize with folks to do that. I could never sell anything. It's a tough way to do it, but
Ryan,
a lot of times,
not just you.
Dropping in unannounced is probably not a good thing. We do get a couple of folks that do that. They'll show up and unannounced. However, I will say, if you want to get them out of there, to at least say hello and exchange cards. Sometimes showing up with something, some cookies, you got to at least go out and say thank you and make contact with that person. So I've seen that to be probably the best way to do it. What I do see also here recently over the last 6 months, it really irks me, and I highly recommend you don't do this, is we get an email from someone that says, hey, I've reached out to you a few times. You haven't responded. Just want to see if you're interested in talking. I go back and search my emails, and I've never heard from this guy. So I see more and more people doing something like that. It's a little excessive.
So, let me cut in real quick there. So what you're saying is, it's not so much that you mind someone saying, hey, I've sent you 2 or 3 emails, you haven't responded. It's that they actually haven't sent 2 or 3 emails, and you go back to verify it. Then they're just a liar. They're trying to cut in line almost, because you might be sympathetic to someone who's been working the angle for a few months, but if you haven't, it's almost like, hey, we're starting on false pretenses here.
Right, and that's actually happened. But you know what? I think people are people, and you put yourself in the other folks' shoes, and you try to be reasonable. And I used to take every single phone call, every single email, but we're just out of time. We don't have a lot of time like we used to, and I may be speaking for myself, but at least they're human beings. They're trying to make a living. At least offer them the courtesy or an answer or a response. Hey, I'm not interested at this time. Even on LinkedIn, the same type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Robert, I think that's a really good point. And Ryan, I don't know if you've seen that, but I've actually seen an uptick in that as well.
Of kind of cutting the line to the hey, we haven't gotten to you, so we're just going to start, but not actually doing the
explicitly what Robert said about getting an email and saying, hey, I've reached out to you 2 or 3 times. I want to talk about X. Where are we? And and just like Robert, I'm sure and you're the same. I mean, I've got a pretty good log of who I'm connected or who I've interfaced with and who I've had conversations with. Maybe I don't remember every minute detail, but I'm certainly going to remember if I've contacted somebody, right? and to not hear, and then to, because basically you're putting it on me that I haven't engaged when you're, just kind of trying to open the door. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's just a respect of time thing more than anything else. And Robert, just to circle back, I mean, I think my only comment really to that is Ryan and I talked about it earlier on the podcast. And I don't know if you listened to the first episode, but I think I briefly talked about it on the first episode as well. But I learned something early in my sales career. I'm always tuned into a radio station called WIIFM, What's in It for Me. And what I mean by that is whenever I'm talking to somebody, whether it be an external or internal stakeholder, I'm always trying to, think through the prism of whatever that other person's context is with the conversation and bring value to them in that light. And so when someone, comes at me in that way and says, hey, I've tried to reach out to you 2-3 times, what's going on, and they haven't, that just is completely diametrically opposed to that, to that mentality, I guess you'd say. And so that's like, even in addition to that, if you're going to talk to me or if you're going to try to interface with me, treat me with respect and let's start the relationship organically, because if you just try to beat the door down, I don't know about you, Robert, but if somebody is overly aggressive and sometimes it's just as simple as someone will call me, we'll have a conversation, and then I'll get, 10 follow-up emails in 2 weeks. Sometimes it's just a little bit too much and you kind of got to read the room. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, here's the thing is that I spent a lot of my career on the service side. So I've been on the wrong end of a butt chewing before. And I understand what it's like to go out there with a client that's just too busy to make time and it's got too many things going on. And I don't want to say be persistent, but be respectful of their time. If they say no or no, thank you, not at this time, then that means no, thank you, not at this time. I don't know what else to say about that other than, one final thing on that. If you really want people to answer your phone calls and make some time, be the best at what you do. Offer a service or a product that's exceptional and best in class. If you can do that, they're going to be calling you. Trust me, I make some phone calls every day too. And I need something and I need you to help me with this. And so be the best at it and get the word out. One other way that works pretty well too is find out who they're connected to and see if they can make an introduction. That always works as well.
Let me ask you this, Robert. So, how do you evaluate? You guys at Titan Rock, I'm sure you kind of have, this is your core area. This is what you're looking to do. I know you'll have a couple of other little small business units that you're deploying and looking at. But someone does get with you. They do meet that meeting. You talk about being the best that you do. But how do you balance that when saying, you know what, I finally got a meeting with someone like Robert Martinez. I want to make sure that I want to pitch X to him because that's what we talked about. But I have other things that might be of value to him. How should people, in your opinion, handle that where they bring you in the most respectful amount of time possible, the main thing, but also don't let you miss out on something else that they might have that is of value?
So that's a tough question. The reason is because everyone's different. You remember these personality tests that they make you take to determine what kind of person, and every person responds differently to that. Some people want the social aspect, talk, where you're from, tell me about your background. Some people want you to just get to the point. And so it just depends on who you're dealing with and what they're interested in. If you're coming in with a superior product or something that really makes sense, then it shouldn't be a problem. Like, for example, I get a lot of requests for SEO support for our website to help us get our product out there. We don't sell a product, right. So it doesn't really do anything for us. Know that before you walk in, that kind of stuff.
Okay. You've been in the business for, we won't date you here, we'll say a few years. You've been in the business, you've worked for bigger companies, now you work for a private equity held company. That's I hate to say smaller because it has a negative connotation, but that's not what I mean at all. However, I respect what you guys do. You've worked with engineers, land people, big money folks, small money folks. In your opinion, what makes the people who succeed in this business long term, and what are the ones that you see that they can last through a shell boom and then they're out? So walk us through that. What makes us be successful in this industry? So
the technical abilities first and foremost. I think if you're going to make money in this business, you need to understand and know what you're doing. I mean, bottom line is, do you know what you're doing? Execution. Secondly, integrity and character. I mean, those are major things. Do what you say you're going to do. Come through on the deal. Those kind of things are important when you're trying to build a reputation as an operating company. One, you better know what you're doing on the ground. You better know how to execute. And if you don't know what you're doing, find someone who does. And secondly, come through. When you're sitting there talking to someone and you put your hand on the table and say, if we get this done, we got a deal or not, follow through on that. And so I think those are the primary things. But honestly, the fundamental aspect of a successful company is its people. No question about it. Wells come and go, fields come and go, shale comes and goes. But if you got great people and they want to be there and want to show up every day, you're going to succeed, because there's a lot of trust there. There's a lot of expertise there. And there's a lot of integrity and character. So I think having the right folks is going to be what makes or breaks you. Too many times you get some people that start out great and they build a team around them, and some folks fall off the wagon or just aren't in it for the same reasons that you are, and things kind of go sideways. But trust and good, solid people are the key.
So Nate, if you're listening to this, those last 90 seconds, that's the 90 seconds that we need to cut out of this episode. You did an okay job last time, but that Robert, that was phenomenal. I love that. I think it's so important for people to grasp that, because I think, and I don't want to be long-winded, so I'm going to cut to a couple of different points I wanted to make. Number one, I think it's so important that what you said about, if you don't have the answer, reach out or talk to somebody that does, because there are people in this industry that are willing and able and ready to help, in those capacities. And if you don't have the answers, but you maybe have the connections, there's ways to kind of bridge the gap. And then also I wanted to quickly address something that you said just a couple minutes ago about being, best in class or bringing the most value. And I think really what that comes down to for me, but if you have a product that you firmly believe in with everything, and the technical side is right and it's priced correctly, and you're presenting the right product in the market, I would argue that those three things kind of get the sales job done for you, right? And so you should be able to, if you have the conviction in your product that it truly is the best, like you mentioned, it should be kind of reversed. The service companies, the clients should be reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, I've heard that you're the best in show. We're doing this. Let's talk." As opposed to having the salesperson have to beat every single door down and go door to door. And I'm not saying that people doing that and going door to door, I'm not saying that that's a bad model. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of value to that. I guess my only point is, if you've done a lot of the front load work, if the company, I should say, has done a lot of the front load work to make sure that the product or service that they're providing truly is the best on the market, that in and of itself should be the marketing plan and the sales tactic, and you should have a lot more focus, or you should have a lot more traction coming inward. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I get over the years is a lot of vendors coming in selling us a bundle package, much like you get from your telecom companies for your internet, televisions, phone, and all of that. And so we get frac, wireline, coil tubing, all try to bundle it. And my comment to them was this: I said, look, if your product, let's just say, for example, wireline, was the best in class, we would already been using it. If your frac product was the best in class, we'd already been using it. So you're selling me what I want, which, let's just say, a frac, that you're throwing in wireline and coil tubing. Maybe I don't want that wireline coil tubing. If they were best in class, I would have been using it. So I think that's one of the things that they try to do. But one other thing that I'd like to note on what you just talked about was one way to keep the business going with the company you're working for is to be an extension of your client. Some of my best service companies are companies that I have trust with, and that I know that they're going to basically be looking out for our best interest, and they're going to be an extension of me looking over that area as if I was doing it. And sometimes that goes opposite of what their directives from their management team are. I mean, they're in the business of selling more chemicals. And so when they cut back the chemicals because it's the right thing to do, we notice that. And so be an extension of your client, and almost like if you're an employee of that client, and you're going to find that things are going to get much, much easier, and doors are going to open much easier.
Well, and Robert, I think part of the reason you're seeing that with some of your vendors is that you are someone who does have integrity and you can be trusted. Whereas some clients that you can't necessarily trust them to be the extension of them, and that's what makes it hard, because they may not always be upfront with you. So I think you have probably earned that reputation where your vendors can feel comfortable to have an open exchange with you, and that's hard to do.
It is, and like I said, I've been a vendor before. It's a tough life, and it just goes back to what I teach my kids. You got to believe in the golden rule, and it's the same thing with employees and when you're managing people. The people that came to work for me, they didn't have to come to work for me. I spent some time with them. I've known them. They've worked with me before. There's trust. They know what they're getting, and they know that we got the right attitude and we're going to do things the right way. And so when you have that kind of mindset, people want to come to work for you. It's not always fun, and when you're going through some tough times, that's what kind of gets you through that.
Well, I know we are up against the clock here. You have been gracious with your time, and would love to get you on before NAPE as we go through the end of this year. Get ready, maybe a pre-NAPE kind of breakdown, maybe kind of nerd out for maybe an hour or two. I don't know how long we can get you, but nerd out for a little bit longer on what's going on and what's changed between, we got Summer NAPE, which is 2 weeks away, but the big NAPE's coming in February, and so I'd love to get you maybe just after the new year, right before NAPE, cut out a little bit of time if you're available to break down for our listeners, because this has been fantastic, and you've done something, just, and I appreciate this, you have done something that a lot of E&P guys won't do, which is get out there and speak honestly to folks who are like me and Ben, and these are the questions that we want to know all the time, because when you're in an environment, as you say, as you're in a vendor, you're trying to sell, you're trying to convince, you're trying to make a deal happen. You're always wondering, what is it they want to know? What is it they want to hear? How do I? Because let's be real here, all three of us. What we don't want to do is spend a bunch of time on things that are useless. So we don't want to spend a bunch of time talking about things that get us nowhere, or going. If someone doesn't like going to lunch, we don't want to go to lunch with them. If you just want to do coffee, let's do coffee. Whatever it is, however that works, we always want to tune into that, and that helps out us and it helps out you as well. So I really do appreciate it, because a lot of folks aren't always willing to talk.
No, appreciate that. I'll tell you one thing that would be nice if we get a chance to talk before the next NAPE here in February. There's going to be a lot of changes this fall with the market. The bank determinations are going to change. There's a lot of noise that I'm hearing right now from bank engineers, and you're going to see that it's going to be a different environment more than likely this fall than going into NAPE. So I'm curious to see how things shake out.
I said NAPE because I didn't want to impose on your schedule. You were welcome to come on before NAPE if you want to come on in a few months. We will have you on as often as you want to come on. I just didn't want to superimpose on your schedule. I was trying to be respectful of your time, as you mentioned earlier, so I didn't want to superimpose that. Well, Robert, anything else that you want to get out there? I don't know if you've got any. I know you've written technical papers before for SPE. I know you do some presentations sometimes. I don't know if you have anything going on like that right now. So if there is, or plug, promote, feel free to say that right now so folks can know anything that you want them to know about yourself or your company.
We're not selling or plugging anything. We're trying to acquire. So at this point, we're looking pretty heavily at different assets, and we're pretty busy, but we're growing as a company. And so if anybody want to sell producing assets, we'll be all over that. We don't have any geographic restrictions, and we're chasing all the deals just like everybody else is.
Well, it sounds like on that note, Ben and I will be putting together an email to send over to you.
my ears perked up a little bit at the end there.
Well, Robert, it's been great to talk to you. Enjoyed getting to see you Friday, and I think we have a meeting. I don't know, next couple of weeks I'll swing by and chat. And thank you so much for doing this. It's been good getting you over the past year. And I will say this: one of the nicest guys I've met in the industry, Ben. I don't think I told you this. So the first time we exchanged a text, he reached in through our text line, and then the next thing I know, he went and bought my lunch at the Dallas Petroleum Club. So that's the kind of guy he is. So,
but you didn't tell him why I reached out, right?
Well, let's not talk about that online.
Sounds like there's a story there. I'm looking forward to hearing
well,
that.
It's going back to being honest and open, right? I just had to say Ryan. I said, Ryan, no, we got to talk here. You don't know who I am, but
no. And I'll tell it real quick. He sent a note, and he said we always ask for listener feedback. And he sent a note and said, "Hey, you guys, I think it was Text on Guest podcast. He goes, y'all kind of banter too much, and my commute is this long, and the beginning and the end is just not enough useful information. I like the middle part. Could you cut that down?" And I didn't like it. It hurt. I'm not gonna lie. Anytime someone says they don't like stuff, you're always like, but what I said, I think I remember correctly, is I appreciate this. Josh and I are gonna talk about it. Also, just so you know, we get a lot of feedback on the beginning and the show that some people like that the most, and so we're trying to balance this out. It's really hard, but I think that's what I said back to you, because I was trying to be honest as well, and from that, it spurned I think a pretty good relationship since then.
No, it's been great. Actually, what's happened is I'd get on the tollway and come down, and I'd lose the last 20 minutes of your podcast, so I'd be the whole day thinking, what did I miss? And I'd have to listen to it on the way back. So, but no, it's been great. Thanks for what you guys do. It's a fantastic podcast. I'm a listener of two of them, and I think this is going to be the third one. And
there we go.
Keep it going.
Well, Robert, I will say I tell Ryan this pretty consistently, that only about 2% of what he actually says is worthwhile. So if you're missing the last 20 minutes, believe me, you pick the value up. You're good.
I'm good to go.
Man, it's rough being me. It's lonely at the top, fellas. It's lonely at the top, just so y'all know. Thanks for your time, Robert. We appreciate it.
Guys. Appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a great one.
You too.
And that was, once again, Robert Martinez, President and CEO at Titan Rock Exploration and Production. Ben, top 2 takeaways.
Top 2 takeaways. I like this a lot better with another guest on, so I don't have to listen to everything. It's not everything you're saying is just directed at me. I get to kind of pass it off to somebody else. I think Robert, what he hit on a couple of things. I mean, if you're going to rewind this podcast and listen to a couple of things, I would rewind back to his answer about the landscape and the market and kind of what's happening. Because I didn't talk about it. I didn't follow up. One of the things that I think is really important. And we can talk about this at length on another podcast, but I think that the mineral market, specifically the Permian mineral market, but just the mineral market in general, is going to be massively different in even 6 months, maybe 12, maybe 18 months from now. It's going to be unbelievably different from a number of different perspectives. One of them, I've got a hypothesis, and again, we can talk about this on another episode because I know we're running out of time here, but I've got a hypothesis that sometime in the next year to 18 months, you're going to see about somewhere between $4 to $7 billion of private equity money that is currently backing some of these mineral buying groups out in the Permian. That's just going to leave the space altogether. They're not going to reinvest somewhere else. They're not going to be looking to deploy that capital somewhere else. I think that there's a lot of money that is not getting nearly the return on investment they were expecting. And so I'm expecting a lot of these funds to just go belly up completely and move out of the space and have fire sale of assets. And I don't mean fire sale in terms of pennies on the dollar. I just mean getting the assets sold as quickly as they can and moving out of the space. And I know that's pretty aggressive. And I know that I'm sure people are going to listen to that on the podcast, and I might get some messages about that, good or bad. But I'm pretty convinced my conviction on that is pretty high. And so that's something I'm kind of bracing for impact on.
Okay. Yeah. And just real quick, slight apology to Robert here. It was impressive. He had like pages of notes he wanted to go over. We just ran out of time, and we didn't want to, when we were booking a guest like Robert, he's so busy. We wanted to keep him in a limited window. And so apologies to Robert. We didn't get to everything that because he did, man. He had, we saw he was pulling up pages of stuff that he wanted to break down some of the deals. And so anyways, so thank you, Robert. And sorry we didn't get to that.
We'll Ryan, get back on. If you'd like to take a couple weeks off, we can put Robert in the chair and see how that goes. Robert, no? Okay, sorry.
I mean,
I didn't mean it. I was just kidding.
Yeah, wow. I continue to be the whipping boy of this show, and that's the new name. Bring in the whipping boy. It's just tough. It's just tough. Anything else that you learned from Robert today? I know you know it all, but maybe you learned something.
I learned a ton. I'm going to be listening to that podcast again. I thought that was a really great conversation, and I'm looking forward to having him on again. Either back into this year or around Nate. I think he's a great guest. Welcome anytime for sure.
It's crazy. A bum like me knows a guy like that. I know, it's just insane. Ben,
top 20 podcast all time. Top 20. I mean,
you can't say it enough.
It doesn't happen overnight, Ryan. I mean, come on.
Well, it doesn't. You're right. No, I thought it was great. Robert's super knowledgeable, and hopefully, we've said this before, listeners. If you do deals or you're in the market, we'd love to get you on. We'd love to get on a lot more guys like Robert as well, because it's kind of a thing that all people in the business, we always want to know, what do they think about stuff? How are they looking at stuff? Because when you're going to pitch, and something he said is, being respectful of their time and pitching it the right way and things like that. And I agree fully. But the other thing is you want to know, how do they want to be pitched? Do they want you to come in and sit around and bring in breakfast? Do they want you to call them? And we were talking earlier about how to get people who you can't get on the phone. Do you text them? And so now what Robert says doesn't apply to everyone, and he even said it himself, but it is good just to make sure that your tool belt is full of the right tools so you can deploy them for the right person.
So to bring this home a little bit for the people listening, and I don't want to over promote the value that Ryan and I have necessarily, but this is a good example.
Can you do that? Can you actually over promote it? I don't think you can.
I don't know, but I'm not going to try. I don't know. We'll see. I'm not sure. You tell me after I say what I'm about to say. I don't know. If you're listening to the podcast today and you are familiar with Titan Rock, or maybe you look on their website and you see what areas they're interested in, and you think you have a deal or you have access to a deal that you think Titan Rock would be interested in reviewing, my suggestion to you is, yes, given what Robert just said, you could pick up the phone or you could email him directly, and you may get a response. Given what he said today, you'll likely get a response. What I would tell you, though, is if you bring that deal or that prospect to Ryan and I, and let us do our due diligence on it first. As an example, it doesn't need to be Ryan and I, but this is just kind of painting a picture. But if you were to bring the deal to Ryan and I and let us do the due diligence first and get it under, get it so that that Ryan and I understand it, we could then walk you into the door at Titan Rock, knowing how Robert likes to be spoken to, knowing how he likes to see deals, knowing how they like to transact. And that in and of itself, it is the value that I think Ryan and I have been talking about time and time again on these podcasts. Because yes, you could walk into that door, you could find their address on Google and go knock on the door, and you may or may not get a good response. But I would argue that the value of having somebody that's in the door already, that knows how those deals go down, is massively valuable. And so if you do have something that you think that Titan Rock may want to take a look at, please reach out to Ryan and I. Obviously, you can reach out to Robert directly as well. But if there's a way that we can help, we'd love to do it. Did I over promote? Was that?
Well, yeah, and I would have said like this, is that most of the things that Ben and I work on, if we're having to work on them together, it's because one of us has a deficiency in our network or our expertise or something like that. And so
I get to work on deals with you. What do you mean have to? That's rough, man.
I mean, I was trying to be nice.
Today.
Huh? What?
I said you came out firing today. Whew.
I thought I was trying to be as nice as I could there. I didn't know. But anyways, but it wasn't fit as a slide. I don't even know what I said now. Cut that from the tape, Nate, and play it at 2-speed. No, I think my point is that part of what you're getting at is, if you go back to one of the things that Robert said, and this, again, I don't think this is a self-promotion. This is a general tip. You look at what Robert said. He said, hey, how do we get in your door? And he talked about, how he used to try to do these things, and, we all sympathize with that. It's a lot easier to partner with someone who has that proper network. And one of the things we're talking about, and we'll get into future episodes, is actually creating this type of referral network, because it's a lot easier if Ben can introduce me to someone to get a deal done than calling, taking chicken biscuits, dropping off a packet, all that stuff. And so I don't think that's an over promotion. I think that's just a reality. If they're, so I would agree with that. Anything else, Ben, before we get out of here today?
I would like to thank you for the Rangers tickets in lieu of the Chick-fil-A. I think I won that deal. Man. Sorry, Robert.
Yeah. Now, thanks.
Well, hold on. Assuming Robert hasn't ended his commute and he's already in the office and not listening to this part.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's true. But, man, I'll be taking Robert to a Rangers game, it looks like now. Thanks a lot, Ben. And you went fishing, and he didn't go fishing either. So
I didn't say that.
I know, but I'm just confessing now. It's just coming out of me. So,
hey, Nate, if you have that picture of the fish that Will caught, can you put that up and superimpose?
No, good Lord, no. Okay, well, we've berated Ryan. We've talked about Ben's 0.09% close rate enough for this episode. We will be back here next week. Do we have a guest, Ben, next week? I know you mentioned it offline, and if you don't, that's fine. I'm just curious. Are we having a guest next week?
Waiting to confirm. Unclear.
Okay. Might have a guest next week. If you want to be a guest, you want to comment, question, concern, being-aboveboard.com is where you can send in those notes. You can connect with Ben and I on LinkedIn. That will be in the show notes. 682-422-4105. You can send a text or voicemail. Ben, did I miss anything on ways that folks can connect with us there?
As always, you killed it.
I killed it. I've never swung at a pitch I didn't hit. And until next time, keep climbing.